which opens the door for me to talk for 1 minute about the Pac-12. They probably don't deserve a large dialogue here, but there's 3 teams at the top of the Pac-12. Okay. I'll put those 3 teams up on a neutral court against anybody, even some of the heavyweights in the Big 12. And that's UCLA, Arizona, and UCLA. The one team that hasn't performed.
USC, right?
USC. I said USC, UCLA, and Arizona. I'm sorry. USC, UCLA, Arizona. The one team that hasn't played up to the standards of the last decade is Oregon. And it's a shame because the narrative you're going to hear about Oregon is they get better as the year goes on, and they do. But unfortunately, because of what they've done in the non-conference, you're going to play them in January and February, and they're going to have the opportunity to beat you. And when they do beat you, it will really hurt, right? And that's what we're talking about here, the power of the non-conference schedule. But on a neutral court, UCLA, when they get Cody Riley back, right, and Peyton Watson continues to develop as that incoming freshman, they have already proven by their win against Villanova and the way they're playing that they can get to Final Four again. They can be a back-to-back Final Four program. When I talk about USC, they're picking right up where they left off. If you look at their defense is outstanding. They're old. I mean, they have a lot of returning players from the team that had a great season a year ago. They don't have Evan Mobley, right? But his brother came back. And Boogie Ellis leaving Memphis, coming to USC and solidifying their backcourt and their point guard position. He's playing great. He not only gives them a quality player, but he's old. He's experienced. So I love USC's defense and experience, and they know how to win because those guys had a great year a year ago. Ditto for UCLA. And for me, talking about Arizona is obviously easy, but a lot of returning starters. I think the quality of talent with Ben Mathurin, Christian Coloco, Azuolas Tubelis, Kerr Kriisa, they have some guys, Dalen Terry, that I believe in. They all returned from a year ago. And Rob, let me say this. When you coach a group like them who wasn't eligible for last year's NCAA tournament because we self-imposed, weren't able to play in the Pac-12 tournament, and you have an off season and a lot of guys return, they're a hungry team. You can see it. And I give Tommy Lloyd a lot of credit. He's implementing his style. They're playing super fast. They right now, I think, lead America in assists for field goals, assisted field goals per game. And I think when you look at how they're playing, the confidence they have, UCLA and SC, that's it. But Washington State, I think, is solid. But right now, the only way a 4th team will get in the NCAA tournament from the Pac-12 is if they win the Pac-12 tournament. I hate to say it, but that's the fact. I mean, I will have no credibility if I continue to talk about this Pac-12 like they're 6 or 7 deep, right? They aren't. But those 3, do not sleep on those 3 teams that I talked about: Arizona, UCLA, and SC. That's it.
I don't think anyone's surprised to see UCLA being this good. I'm personally not surprised to see Arizona being as good as they have been. But USC is the one that kind of got me a little bit. I thought that they had potential. I did not think that they would be this good. I thought that Evan Mobley was too much to replace. Did you see this coming from them?
I did, because their supporting cast with Evan a year ago was very understated, very underrated. I mean, they had an older group last year. They played very well together. They were an excellent defensive team from start to finish. And a lot of those same guys are back. And that's the one thing, Rob, returning experience. You know, Arch and I talk about it every day. You know, it's one thing to get a player who played in your program a year ago that returns. But when you can get a starter, an all-conference player, to return, that's worth its weight in gold, because now you're getting older, but they're astute with your system. It's kind of what we talked about with Villanova. You know, they have that going for them, right? Where they've been together, they're older, they return the same players in the same roles from a year ago across the board. And I think in with USC, they have that. And then the X factor has become Boogie Ellis, because Boogie Ellis is a scorer, a shooter, and he has the ball in his hands. He gives them some firepower that I think their offense needed.
Washington State, you know, they're an interesting team because I think, you know, they're much improved. And Sean, you know, Kyle's a really good coach, but they have 5 non-conference games left. And, you know, when you look at those guys, Huge game tomorrow night for Washington State. They play, I believe, an undefeated Weber State team. You don't know how big that game is for Washington State at home, but they're going to get Washington State, a really good South Dakota State, a really good New Mexico State, and Northern Colorado, all at home before they go semi-home against Boise before they go into the league. Washington State, if they would go 11-2 with 5 more wins here heading into the league, or even third loss, if they go into conference play here, because they've already split their first conference game, they got 18 left. But if they go into conference play with 3 losses after Christmas or 2 losses, Washington State can make a run and get into the tournament with some good wins, beating the UCLA at home, or getting Arizona.
Totally disagree with you, little brother.
Why?
Totally.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm going to stick to what I've said. It's not that Washington State isn't good enough, because they're on the border. They could be a tournament team, but they're not going to be allowed to be in this year's NCAA tournament because of the losses that the Pac-12 has incurred as a conference in the non-conference play. You're not going to be allowed. There's too many losses. And when they start to play this 20-game schedule, they're not going to get enough credit for their conference games versus some of these other conferences that we're talking about. You play a road game in the Big East in January or February, or you play a road game in the Big 10 or the Big 12, you're going to get so much credit for playing that game because those teams are going to be quad 1 and quad 2. You look at the Pac-12 right now, because of November and December, it has decimated the conference, other than the 3 teams that we talked about. So the bottom, any team below those 4 that you're talking about, has really hurt Washington State's deal.
Well, what really is hurting Washington State is their draw in league because they lost to USC at home. That's one opportunity against the Big 3,
right? By 2.
But they only have Arizona, UCLA, and USC one time. So they're only going to play the Big 3 4 total games. So they're going to have a hard time. They're going to have to run they'd have to make a serious run.
I apologize to Washington State. I love Kyle Smith. If they're in the NIT or you're playing a heck of a basketball team. They might be a year away from really being a tournament team, but I'm telling you, it's what I keep harping on because I lived it out here. When you see the Pac-12 start getting beat in non-conference, you just panic because the Pac-12, you know how they have the first 4 in the NCAA tournament? It's actually the Pac-12 and the 3 others. There's always a Pac-12 team in the first 4 of the NCAA tournament. Remember, last year, UCLA would have played Michigan State at UD Arena in Dayton, Ohio. In the first 4, they got to the final 4, right? I mean, if you look at it, every year the Pac-12 gets that one team in and whatever. But this year, I think that's where it's at. I will say that those 3 teams at the top are very good. And I would include Arizona in that with USC and UCLA. I think they're very good.